Everyone knows about the 300 Spartans who died at Thermopylae. The movies, the memes, the merchandise. They are frozen in time as perfect heroes, dying beautifully for freedom. But here is what they do not tell you. The real war did not end with that glorious last stand. It got uglier, messier, and far more brutal. 1 year later, 10,000 Spartans would fight a battle so savage, so morally compromised, that history almost prefers to forget it ever happened. This is not a story about noble sacrifice. This is a story about revenge. After Thermopylae, the Persian king Xerxes did not just invade Greece, he erased it. Athens, the cultural heart of the Greek world, was burned to ashes. Not once, but twice. The temples were smashed. The homes were leveled. An entire population became refugees, sleeping on beaches and hillsides, watching their city burn from across the water. The trauma was total. The Greeks were not just defeated, they were humiliated, displaced, and psychologically shattered. The island of Salamis, 479 before Christ. An Athenian counselor named Lycidas stands before the refugee assembly and makes a suggestion. Perhaps we should hear the Persian peace offer. They stone him to death. Right there, on the assembly floor. Then the women hear what happened. They run to his house, they drag out his wife, his children, 3 kids. The oldest is 12. The rocks fly again. By sunset, an entire family is gone, erased, because one man suggested maybe there was another way besides total war. This is what the Persians created. Not just military defeat, a collective psychotic break. Greece had become a wounded animal that would bite anything, even itself. But Xerxes made a fatal mistake. He got bored. After burning Athens the second time, he sailed home to Persia, leaving his cousin Mardonius behind with 300,000 elite troops. And Mardonius was nothing like Xerxes. Where the king wanted spectacle, the general wanted results. Mardonius positioned his army in the flatlands of Boeotia, perfect cavalry country. Then he sat there, waiting, knowing the Greeks would have to come to him or starve, knowing that when they did, his horsemen would slaughter them on open ground. The Athenians, watching their city smoke from across the water, finally cracked. But not the way Mardonius expected. They sent runners to Sparta with a message, not a plea, a threat. We have 300 warships, the best navy in the world. Right now they fight for Greece. But if you do not march north in 48 hours, we sail them to Persia. We make a deal with Xerxes. Then we come back for you. It was not a bluff. The Athenians were broken enough to mean it. Sparta understood immediately. An Athenian-Persian alliance would be apocalyptic. Persian golden armies combined with Greek naval supremacy. The walls would not save them. Nothing would. That night, the Spartan ephors made a decision that shook the ancient world. Total mobilization. 5,000 Spartan warriors prepared to march. The elite, the professional killers who had trained since age 7. But 5,000 was not enough. Not against 300,000. So they did something unprecedented. They armed the helots, 35,000 slaves. Men who were property, who could be beaten or killed for sport, suddenly handed weapons in order to fight alongside their masters. Think about that. 1/3 of this army were enslaved men who had every reason to let their masters die. When the Athenian ambassadors arrived at dawn to deliver their ultimatum, a Spartan guard pointed north. You are too late. They left at midnight, 45,000 men. You will have to run to catch them. The largest Greek army ever assembled was already moving. And at its head rode Pausanias, regent of Sparta, leading free men and slaves, Spartans and Athenians, toward a confrontation that would determine everything. 60 miles north, Mardonius heard the news and smiled. They were coming. The Greeks were actually marching toward him on terrain he had chosen. Flat ground where his cavalry could operate freely, where Greek heavy infantry would be isolated and destroyed. He had spent months preparing this killing ground. Now the victims were walking straight into it. What Mardonius did not know was that Pausanias had no intention of fighting fair. The Spartan regent understood they could not win a conventional battle. The numbers were impossible. So he was going to have to do something unconventional. Something dangerous. Something that would push his own men to the breaking point before the Persians ever got the chance. The Greek column marched for 3 days straight. No rest, no mercy. Men collapsed and were left behind. By the time they reached the foothills of Mount Cithaeron, overlooking the plains of Plataea, they were exhausted, dehydrated, and terrified. Below them spread an ocean of Persian tents, cavalry horses by the thousands, campfires that stretched to the horizon, 300,000 professional warriors from an empire that spanned continents. And the Greeks had 45,000 men who could barely stand. One of Pausanias' officers, Amompharetus, stared at the impossible odds and whispered, "We are going to die here." Pausanias did not disagree. "Yes, probably, but we are going to make them pay for every inch of ground. And if we are very lucky, very smart, and if the gods decide they are bored with Persia winning, we might just survive long enough to see Mardonius bleed." What happened next would become 11 days of psychological warfare, logistical nightmare, and ultimately a battle so savage that 800 years later, historians would still struggle to explain how it was even possible. The waiting was about to begin, and the waiting would be worse than any fighting. The first 5 days were a masterclass in psychological torture. Mardonius did not attack. He did not need to. He just sat there in his fortified camp on the plains, watching the Greeks cling to the rocky slopes like starving wolves afraid to come down from the mountains. Every morning, Persian cavalry would ride up to the edge of javelin range. They would hoot, they would jeer, they would call the Spartans cowards. Women? Then they would wheel away, laughing, daring the Greeks to come down and fight like men. Pausanias held the line. He forbade anyone from breaking formation, from charging, from giving Mardonius what he wanted. The discipline was iron, but discipline does not fill empty stomachs. The Greeks had marched with 3 days of supplies. Those ran out on day 4. The supply convoys from the south should have been arriving daily, with bread, wine, salted meat. They never came. On day 6, a patrol found out why. 5 miles back in the mountain passes, the wreckage of 500 supply wagons burned. The oxen slaughtered, the drivers butchered. Persian cavalry had circled around the Greek army and cut their lifeline. Suddenly, this was not about fighting anymore. It was about not starving. Pausanias rationed what little remained, a handful of grain per man per day, barely enough to keep a person upright. The Helot slaves got even less. By day 8, men were chewing on leather straps just to have something in their mouths. Then Mardonius made his next move. On day 9, Persian horsemen bypassed the Greek battle line entirely. They rode straight for the Gargaphia spring, the only source of fresh water for 45,000 men, and they destroyed it, not by poisoning it, by trampling it. Hundreds of horses churning the spring into a thick, muddy slurry. By noon, the water was undrinkable. Brown sludge that would give men dysentery if they were desperate enough to try it. Now the Greeks had no food and no water. In August, heat, wearing bronze armor that turned their bodies into ovens. Pausanias called his officers together that night. The Spartan commanders, the Athenian generals, the representatives from the allied cities. They argued for hours. The Athenians wanted to attack immediately. The Corinthians wanted to retreat. The Spartans wanted to hold position. Finally, at midnight, Pausanias made the only decision left. We withdraw. Tonight, to the high ground near the town of Plataea. There is water there. Defensible terrain. We move in complete silence during the second watch. It was the most dangerous maneuver in warfare. A night retreat in the face of the enemy, it required perfect coordination, perfect silence, perfect timing. One mistake, and the entire army would be slaughtered in the darkness. The order went out. Second watch. Everyone moves together. No torches, no noise. Just slip away into the night and regroup at the rally point. But here is where everything fell apart. The center of the Greek line, troops from Corinth and Megara and a dozen smaller cities, did not wait for the signal. The moment darkness fell, they panicked. They grabbed their shields and ran. Not walked. Ran. All the way back to the walls of Plataea itself, 6 miles away, effectively deserting the battlefield. In one night, the Greek army lost half its strength to fear. But the real disaster was happening on the right wing, where the Spartans were positioned, where Pausanias needed absolute discipline to pull off the retreat. A Spartan captain named Amompharetus refused to move. He stood there with his unit, 300 men, and told Pausanias to his face that Spartans do not run from barbarians, that he would rather die than bring shame on his country. That retreat was cowardice by another name. Pausanias begged him, explained it was not retreat but tactical repositioning. Amompharetus did not care about semantics. To a Spartan raised on the legend of Thermopylae, walking backward was heresy. The argument got physical. Amompharetus picked up a boulder from the ground. He slammed it down at Pausanias' feet with a thud that echoed through the camp. With this pebble, I vote not to flee from the strangers. It was a mockery of Spartan democracy, using a boulder instead of a voting stone, casting his vote for death. While this insane family drama played out, the Athenians on the left wing sat confused in the darkness. They were supposed to wait for the Spartans to move first, but nothing was happening. They sent a runner to find out what the delay was. The runner found the Spartan commanders screaming at each other while the army stood motionless. Pausanias, exhausted and furious, finally made a decision that would haunt him. He ordered the rest of the Spartan army to begin the retreat without Amompharetus, hoping that when the stubborn captain saw his brothers leaving, he would swallow his pride and follow. It was a gamble played with thousands of lives. The main Spartan column began moving south in the darkness, slowly, constantly looking back, waiting for Amompharetus to crack. He finally did. When he realized he was truly being abandoned to face 300,000 Persians with 300 men, he ordered his unit to jog after the main force. But it was too late. The sky was turning gray, dawn was breaking, birds were singing, and from the Persian camp across the river, sentries were rubbing their eyes and staring at something that made no sense. The Greek position was empty. The center was gone. The Athenians were nowhere to be seen. And on the slopes to the south, strung out in a disorganized column with massive gaps between units, were the Spartans. Exposed, vulnerable, running. General Mardonius stepped out of his tent. He looked at the fleeing Greeks. Then he started laughing. Laughing so hard his guards thought he had lost his mind. Are these the men who never retreat? Look at them run! He did not wait for his infantry to form proper battle lines. He did not wait for a complex tactical plan. He simply pointed at the retreating Spartans and shouted one word: get them. 300,000 Persian warriors surged forward like a dam breaking. Cavalry, infantry, archers, all of them racing to catch the Spartans before they could escape. Pausanias, marching up the ridge, heard the sound first. A low rumble, then a roar. He turned and saw the horizon fill with dust and death. They had been caught in the open, exactly what he had tried to avoid. And now there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The Battle of Plataea had officially begun, and the Greeks were already losing. The sun climbed higher, the Persian army closed the distance, and Pausanias did something that should have gotten every Greek killed. He stopped running. He ordered the entire Spartan column to halt, to drop to one knee behind their shields. Then he turned his back on the enemy and called for a priest. The Greeks did not fight until the gods gave permission. A goat was dragged forward. Its throat was slit. The priest examined the liver for omens. The signs were bad. The gods said no. So Pausanias waited. While arrows began falling like rain, while men screamed as bronze points found gaps in armor, while the Persian cavalry circled and taunted and killed. Imagine being in that line, crouching behind your shield, hearing the thud, thud, thud of arrows striking bronze, hearing your friends die beside you, and your commander is staring at goat entrails, shaking his head. Another goat, another throat slit, another bad omen. Wait, the Helot slaves were dying in droves. They had lighter armor, wicker shields. The arrows went through them like paper. But the Spartans held the line, refusing to move, refusing to fight back. One Spartan named Calliades took an arrow through his side. As he died, bleeding out on the rocky ground, he grabbed his friend's arm and whispered, "I do not mind dying for Greece. What I mind is dying without having struck a blow." This went on for an hour, a full hour of passive slaughter while Pausanias desperately tried to get divine approval. The Tegean allies on the Spartan flank could not take it anymore. They started to shift forward, ready to charge without orders. Pausanias glared at them. Tears were streaming down his face, a rare display of emotion from a Spartan. He looked up at the distant temple of Hera and screamed a prayer, begging the goddess not to let them die in shame. Then a third goat was sacrificed. The priest looked at the liver. His eyes went wide. He nodded. The omens were good. The gods said yes. Pausanias stood. He did not need a speech. He raised his spear. 10,000 men who had been frozen in place, absorbing death for an hour, suddenly exploded forward. The pent-up rage of that hour of suffering was about to be unleashed on the Persian line. The Spartans did not just charge. They erupted like a volcano given human form. The statues came to life. The wait was over. They crashed into the Persian center with such force that men in the front ranks were physically lifted off their feet and trampled. The Persian wicker shields, excellent against arrows, shattered like kindling against Spartan bronze. The battle became the othismos, the shoving match. And this is where Persian bravery met Greek physics and lost. The Persians fought like lions. They grabbed Spartan spears with bare hands and snapped the wooden shafts. They threw themselves at the bronze wall with daggers and swords. But courage cannot defeat engineering. Persian linen armor stopped arrows. Spartan bronze stopped everything. When a Persian struck a Spartan, his blade glanced off. When a Spartan struck a Persian, he went through bone. The killing became industrial, mechanical. Spartans stabbed, bashed with shields, stepped over corpses, repeated. The helots swarmed the gaps, finishing wounded Persians with knives and javelins. It was a meat grinder, turning men into pulp. At the center of the chaos rode Mardonius on a white horse, surrounded by his elite guard of 1,000 picked men. He was fighting brilliantly, cutting down Spartans who broke formation. But the Spartans saw him, saw the purple cloak and white horse, and they shifted like a predator smelling blood. The distance between Pausanias and Mardonius began to shrink. The Persians threw everything into the gap to protect their commander. Bodies, furniture, desperation. But the bronze wall kept coming. A Spartan named Erimnestos spotted Mardonius above the melee. He lunged with his spear. Some accounts say a rock crushed the general's skull. Others say the spear pierced his chest. Either way, Mardonius fell from his horse and hit the dirt. He did not get up. The sound of the battle changed instantly. The Persian roar faltered. The immortals who had never retreated in their lives saw their leader down and broke. They ran. The second in command, Artabazus, was commanding 40,000 reserve troops, enough to potentially save the battle. Instead, he watched Mardonius fall, did the math, and turned his entire force around. He marched straight out of Greece, abandoning the army to its fate. The remaining Persians panicked. They fled to their fortified camp and barred the gates. They had just trapped themselves in a cage with a tiger. The Spartans were terrible at siege warfare. They paced outside the walls like frustrated wolves. But then the Athenians arrived. And unlike Spartans, Athenians knew how to take a wall. They breached the stockade. Through that gap poured the full fury of men who had lost everything. What happened inside was not battle, it was extermination. The Greeks did not take prisoners, did not accept surrenders. They moved through the crowded camp, killing everything that moved. Of nearly 260,000 Persians who stayed with Mardonius, ancient sources claim only 3,000 survived. The numbers are probably exaggerated, but the archaeological reality is clear. An entire generation of Persian manpower was destroyed in a single afternoon. When the killing finally stopped, the Greeks stood in silence among the carnage. Then they began to notice something else. The wealth. Mardonius had inherited Xerxes' personal tent, gold mixing bowls, silver tables, tapestries worth more than a soldier's life, chests of coins. Pausanias walked into the Persian pavilion. He saw the luxury. He had a strange idea. He ordered the Persian cooks to prepare a feast exactly as they would for Mardonius. Then he had Spartan cooks make their standard meal, black broth, lentils, and vinegar. He placed the two meals side by side, the Persian feast versus Spartan sludge. He called his commanders in and started laughing. Look at how he lived. All this luxury, yet he came here to rob us, who have so little. It was a moment of triumph, of mockery, of Spartan superiority. But as Pausanias stared at that gold, something inside him broke. The man who mocked the feast would soon become addicted to it. Within years, he was wearing Persian robes, hiring Persian guards, writing secret letters to Xerxes, offering to betray Greece for gold and power. The Spartans eventually cornered him. He fled to a temple claiming sanctuary. They could not enter without angering the gods. So they bricked up the doors. His own mother placed the first stone. They let him starve to death in the darkness. The hero of Plataea died a traitor, destroyed not by Persian spears but by Persian gold. This is why we do not make movies about Plataea. The hero becomes a villain. The victory leads to corruption. It is messy and complicated and human. But we cannot forget what happened on those plains. 10,000 Spartans and their slaves looked apocalypse in the eye and refused to blink. They proved free people fighting for survival could break an empire. It was brutal. It was necessary. And it was the salvation of Western civilization. If you made it this far, you are a true history enthusiast. Hit that subscribe button to keep these forgotten stories alive, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It is incredible that we can explore these ancient battles together from all corners of the world. The 300 Spartans at Thermopylae bought time with their beautiful deaths, but the 10,000 at Plataea paid the price with their ugly victory. Remember both. Remember the cost. Remember that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you survive.